In this comparative study, I will be exploring how conventions and codes differ across cultural identities in the two psychological thrillers Parasite and The Talented Mr. Ripley. Directed by Bong Joon-ho, Parasite explores the cultural context of the vast divide between wealth and poverty in present-day Seoul, South Korea. The film follows the Kims, a four-person working-class family living in a cramped, decrepit inner-city apartment. After adopting fake identities and routines, the Kims gradually pry their way into the lives of the Parks, a wealthy Korean family, successfully winning their trust along the way. Unknowingly, the Parks become the hosts of a full family whom they believe had no previous connection whatsoever. The Talented Mr. Ripley, directed by Anthony Minghella, follows a similar path. Raised in Boston and orphaned at the age of 5, Tom Ripley lived with his aunt, extorting people for money until moving to New York. After an encounter with the father of his old friend, Dickie Greenleaf, he takes the advantage of his naiveness and agrees to a job offer. The job proposed by Mr. Greenleaf required retrieving Dickie from the fictional Italian coastal city of Montebello.
Could you ever conceive of going to Italy, Tom? Persuade my son to come home? I'd pay you $1,000.
I have always wanted to go to Europe, sir, but...
Good. Now you can go for a reason.
The cultural context of this film is related to Italy in the late 1950s, in which Italians saw an economic explosion that resulted in the rise of living standards. They enjoy the luxuries of Montebello until Dickie's love interest, Marge, deems their relationship strange and unexpected. The opening scene in The Talented Mr. Ripley uses contrasting low-key lighting to slowly reveal the protagonist. Tom is being incorporated into the scene with sections rather than all at once. With the addition of a slow, revolving close-up shot, the editing of this scene in particular makes Tom look fractured into different pieces, possibly reinforcing the image of his shattered, dubious personality. Although it is a minor scene in the film, it certainly gives the audience a perspective into a set of split personalities, and whether or not they will derive into a problem later on. In Parasite, the opening scene begins with a slow downwards vertical pan, showing how far below the street the Kims are living. High-key lighting on Ki-woo coming from his window allows the shadows of the working-class Koreans to be cast down upon him. This shot, along with a long cut of each individual room in the apartment, establishes their current living situation. It doesn't, however, begin to establish their level of desperation. A medium shot outside of the window now shows a fumigator moving through their complex with a thick cloud of smoke behind them. A medium close-up shot shows Park Dong-ik continuing to work with a blank expression as his family struggles for air. In Parasite, key scenes exhibit cinematography that mirrors and contrasts the same aspects shown in The Talented Mr. Ripley. Scenes between the Kims and the Parks often show the spurious, sometimes genuine emotions between the two families. For instance, when watching Ki-woo work with Da-hai, the close-ups between them display their familiar connection. Although their connection may seem genuine, their newfound infatuation with each other is likely a ploy. A continuous medium close-up of the pair shows Ki-woo slowly serenading her until they finally kiss. This act reinforces their relationship in order to keep his job as her teacher. Kissing in public is looked down upon and seen as highly immodest among older individuals in South Korea. This has become less taboo with the current generation of young adults, however. Displays of affection in The Talented Mr. Ripley were much more common, thus, it reflects the accuracy of the cultural context of that time. A similar scene shows the second meeting between Dickie and Tom, in which Tom is asked to do an impression.
It's 3. Nobody should have more than one talent. Okay, do an impression.
Now? The only talent my son has is for cashing his allowance.
What?
Oh, I like to sail. Believe me, I love to sail. Instead, I make boats.
Stop!
Other people sail them.
It's too much. You're making all the hairs on my neck stand up.
Oh, yes, jazz. Oh, jazz, let's face it, it's just insolent noise.
Amazingly, Tom mimics Dickie's father and his tendencies to a near perfect degree. Dickie seemed to enjoy it, even asking Tom to replicate the impression for Marge.
Pleasure to meet you. Dickie's made a fine catch.
Uncanny.
I know Emily thinks so.
I don't get it.
It's uncanny.
Though he was seemingly taken aback by the request, his performance looked almost rehearsed. It was spot on, down to the tiniest detail in his facial expressions, catchphrases, and of course, his low, booming voice. A close-up on Tom's face shows how serious he takes the request. He essentially switches into a completely different person at the drop of a hat. The lighting in the courtyard signifies tranquility and warmth, but this is simply a decoy used to entrap the audience in a false perception of Tom Ripley. Just like Ki-young, Tom seems to fit in well with the wealth around him, likely contributing to the amount of trust both Dickie and Marge have for him. Even before their first meeting with Da Song, she firmly introduces her roles as a teacher and asks Park Hyung-kyo to leave them to do their work.
일어나. 똥꼬에.
어머님은 나가주세요.
예?
저는 학부모와 절대같이 수업 안 합니다.
그래도 오늘 첫날인데 보시다시피 해가 좀...
내려가 계세요.
By using the symmetrical background and hyperbolized proportions, the considerable size of the park residence is accentuated to further show the vast divide between both the wealthy and the poor in South Korea. Throughout the scene, the camera is placed on eye level between both Ki-young and Park Hyung-kyo. The result of this cinematography is to equalize the power between them. Realistically, her employer should already have more power in the situation and should be ordering her. Ki-young's tone, mannerisms, and the way in which she presents herself is another determining factor of this power differential. The first indication of the power Park Hyung-kyo has over Moon Gwan, their maid, is shown when she looks back at her while walking towards Ki-young. A slight bow is given as she exits the shot. In fact, Ki-young prompts the same response from Park Hyung-kyo as she overrides the power of Moon Gwan. As Park Hyung-kyo approaches Ki-young, she is given the option to sit, and a slow pan between the pair working displaces Moon Gwan from the situation. Additionally, Ki-young's black, formal dress strongly differentiates her from the rest of the characters in the shot. In Parasite, we slowly watch the Kims poison the relationship not only between Moon Gwan and Ms. Park, but also Mr. Park and his primary driver, Yoon. Park Hyung-kyo and Moon Gwan are essentially foil characters, bringing out the most intimidating and cunning traits in Ki-young. She feeds on the newfound respect of her employer, lying directly to her face. She comes up with faux references to her studies in Chicago, describing specific traits about Da Song that are too apparent to deny.
어머님, 제가 아까 미술심리학, 미술치료 쪽으로도 공부 중이라고 말씀드렸죠?
네네.
다송이한테 무슨 일이 있었나요, 1학년 때? 솔직히 말씀을 드리면 제가 다송이를 맡을 수 있을지 없을지 판단을 하려면 그 부분을 꼭 짚고 넘어가야 될 것 같아요.
After finding a pattern in his paintings, she links it with the psychological term, the schizophrenic zone. Regardless of the validity of this statement, she says it with full intent, eliciting the desired reaction from
그림
Park
우측하단
Hyung-kyo.
이쪽 부분을 스키조프레니아 존이라고 해서 신경정신과적 징후가 잘 드러나는 곳으로 보거든. 여기도 보세요. 이런 독특한 형태를 그려놨죠, 다송이가.
네.
The scene firmly establishes Ki-young as a member of the Park household. One particular scene in The Talented Mr. Ripley conveys one of the first instances in which the relationship between Tom and Dickie starts to become peculiar. The scene begins with an over-the-shoulder shot of Tom looking in the full-body mirror. The song he is singing has connotations of lust, again mirroring the feelings he has for Dickie. The scene continues with a panning shot of the right side of the room, back to the mirror, where Dickie is standing watching it.
I was just amusing myself. Sorry.
I wish you'd get out of my clothes. Do you have my shoes
This blocking
on?
was done purposely to show how Tom is effectively morphing into Dickie himself. A close-up shot on Dickie solidifies his reaction, incorporating a sense of tension growing between the pair. After the death of Dickie, the cinematography changed dramatically. Aimed at showing Tom's descent into madness, the remaining scenes focus more closely on his life as a completely different person. The camera shots are more in-depth, and the lighting is not nearly as brilliant. The same case could be said for Parasite, as certain shots show Ki-woo in a depressive state after the death of his sister and the forced reclusion of his father. Cinematography in both films was specifically made to create tension while still managing to strengthen the relationships between various characters. The Talented Mr. Ripley and its overall storyline does not paint its protagonist Tom in good light, leaving audiences questioning his integrity from the beginning. Parasite, however, includes characters with a higher set of morals that begin to deteriorate as time continues. The work they are being subjected to intensifies, with the reality of their financial situation being reminded to them constantly. This is reinforced with the notion of smell, in which the Kims seem to have a stench of poverty that lingers with them. With obvious values in regards to family, seeing the good notions of the Kims and Tom's positive attitude fester into madness has a jolting effect on the audience. With the addition of the features discussed, both Bong Joon-ho and Anthony Minghella produced two cult classics that are bound to be enjoyed for years to come. Regarding the plot and the cinematography, the ways in which these films differ and co-align is the backbone of this study, and further investigations would undoubtedly lead to more interesting discoveries.